Diane, and this is How to Train Your Caterpillar, a spiritual life coaching channel. You are very welcome here. Thank you for checking out the channel and the video. I appreciate it a lot. So I'm not sure what the title of this video is going to be, but I just wanted to make a quick one about like toxic positivity within like spirituality, and about why it's good to cry. That's what the video is going to be about. So before we get into it, I just want to say again, thank you for checking out the video. Hopefully you'll find something in here that you can use and you'll enjoy it. And if that's the case and you feel called to like and subscribe for me, I'd appreciate that very much as well. So I just feel like there's a lot of pressure within the spiritual community. Like, everybody talks about vibing high and keeping your vibration high and how to raise your vibration, but nobody really talks about the shadow work, right? If you want to know what I mean about shadow work in depth, I have another video about that. But basically, when we're talking about shadow work, we're talking about looking at like the blocks that are stopping us from where we want to be, like stopping us from being where we want to be in life, and removing them. And those blocks are low vibrational emotions. Okay, so I'm going to put up my little chart here. This is from Dr. David Hawkins, the scale of consciousness, in case you're wondering what that is. But of course, like, emotions have vibrations, so the lower emotions like guilt and shame and fear and anger, like, they have lower vibrations. I mean, yes, you want to keep your vibration as high as you can. That's the goal, right? You want to get to happiness and you want to be, unconditional love and peace, right? But the way to get there permanently is not by ignoring negative emotions that you have, okay? Like, that's what I mean by toxic positivity. This kind of, oh, well, we have to stay high vibrational all the time. We should be happy all the time. Like, we should be unconditional love and peace all the time. Yes, but we're human. We came here to experience the human experience, which is all the human emotions, okay? And the way to get to this high vibration permanently is not to ignore the emotions that we have, but to get to a point where you are able to calmly identify what it is you're feeling, take a step back and try to understand what the trigger is, so that you don't get sucked into the emotion, but you can be like, oh, that's the trigger, I don't need that, let it go, right? That's the goal. But you need practice to get there, and simply ignoring emotions is not the same thing. That's toxic positivity, because actually what shadow work is can be these kind of days or even like weeks, depending on how far along your journey you are, of feeling really sad or feeling really angry, or releasing like all this like fear that you have, right? These low vibrational emotions that you've been carrying around with you probably since childhood. Most people, like, this stuff comes from childhood. It's something that we learn in childhood or teenage years, or it can be bad relationships, whatever it is. The goal of spirituality is like, it's not just to be like, oh, happy all the time. That's the end result. But if you're not doing the shadow work, then frankly you're not really on the spiritual path, in my humble opinion, okay? Because it's when you are able to release these emotions that are getting in your way and holding you back and stopping you from having unconditional love for yourself and for other people. Once you chip away at these, the ego, then we rise to this place of high vibration. But we do it gradually, we do it naturally, and then you stay there, because the thing to do is like, if you suddenly feel very like sad, or you're suddenly feeling very angry, the thing to do is to be like, well, what was the trigger there? What was the trigger? Like, why did I suddenly get sad? Or why did I suddenly become terrified? Or suddenly, like, why did I suddenly get really angry? What was the trigger? What happened? Because once you are able to do that, you can then trace the source. And once you've traced the source, it's usually something stupid. You know, like, oh, I got bullied in high school. But people in high school are horrible, and they probably, you know, they didn't mean it anyway. They were just going through their own stuff. Like, oh, I can release that. It's usually literally as simple as that, you know? Or, you know, like for example, say you're having like blocks in your abundance or something like that. You know, it could be that you're having like, you know, you have guilt or shame about having money, or you feel like you don't deserve it or something like this. So the more that you work with these lower vibrational emotions and identify them and get rid of them, you're just removing all these blocks. So actually toxic positivity, like this constant pressure to like not feel these lower emotions and stuff in spirituality, is actually holding you back, you know? And I just wanted to say something about crying as well, because, you know, I used to think this too, like, oh, crying is so weak, you know, like, oh, you shouldn't cry, like, that's, like, so, you know, like, that's pathetic that you're crying, like, you're so weak. Crying is literally just a way for energy to leave the body, like, for emotions to leave the body. You know, we're humans, we're just little humans learning how to transmute all these negative emotions. That's why we're here, you know. So crying is just a way to transmute the energy, just to let it go. The thing is, like, people who don't cry, like, who hold it all in and, oh, it's so weak, I'm not gonna cry, man, like, I'm so tough, they just end up being super angry or like repressed, you know, because anger is usually because you're scared, or it's like grief that you've not dealt with from your past, you know, like sadness about the way your life has gone, or how you were treated, or something that happened, you know. But, and I'm not saying that you should be sitting around crying all the time. That's not, you know, if that's happening, that's probably something you need to look into, right? And, you know, unless of course you're in the grieving process, in which case it's healthy to cry, you know, so you can get rid of the grief, because it has to go, you have to let it out somehow, because otherwise it can stay in the body and cause a lot of like physical issues in your body, because unprocessed emotions like show up as like, you know, a blockage in the body, and it manifests as a disease. You know, for example, like, you know, people who have like a lot of grief that they don't let out can turn to like alcoholism, which will mess up your liver, for example, right? Just for an example. Or if you're angry all the time, you know, you can get hemorrhoids because it messes with your root chakra, you know, things like this. If you're very sad and you have like a lot of grief that you've not dealt with, you can have heart problems, or you can have lung problems. So it's like really important, just these little things that you can do, you know. And like I said, I'm not saying that you should be in work crying all the time. I'm not saying you should be that person. And like, you don't even have to do it with people around, you know. Of course, I don't do it with people around, you know. I wait till I'm by myself, and then I have a little cry, and then I feel much better afterwards. But going back to this thing about like releasing the emotions, you know, if you have those days when you're like really sad, you know, and you're like really angry about, I don't know, you know, things that people did to you, or like the way that your life has turned out, or you're angry because you're scared, or there's some like grief from the past coming up, this is all like trauma. This is the shadow work. That's the shadow work that needs to be processed. You know what I mean? So there's no shame in not being able to keep your vibration super high all the time. And remember, people who have more trauma in their past are much more likely to succumb to these like days or weeks of like shadow work, where you have to release the emotions, right? Some people just might not have as much, right? But yeah, much better. Like toxic, you know, there's just like a lot of pressure, I think, to just be like happy clappy all the time in spirituality, and that's not reality. That's not how shadow work is done. That's not how you raise your vibration long term, you know. But certainly, you know, try and be happy when you can, of course. But you know, when you feel these emotions coming up, like, let yourself feel them. Journal, try and figure out where the trigger is, because once you've done that, like I said, it's like magic almost. You can be like, well, I don't need that, let it go. You know, I don't know if I said this, but you can think of yourself as like a little hot air balloon. You know, that's, I think David Hawkins says that in one of his books. I think that's where I got this from. I'm sure it is. I will leave the book that I'm ranting about in the description box, but I'm sure it's him. He talks about, imagine yourself as a hot air balloon, right? And all these negative emotions that you're carrying around since like childhood or even past lives or whatever, like fear and anger and guilt and shame and sadness. Imagine you're a hot air balloon and these negative emotions are sandbags, you know, excuse me, totally losing my voice here. Like, you can ignore the sandbags as much as you want. It's not going to make them go away. You know, and you can, you know, pump as much, you can crank up that flame and get as much hot air going in that balloon as you can, and it'll rise temporarily, but it will always come back down because you have these heavy sandbags. And until you look at the sandbags and try and figure out where they came from so you can release them, you're not, you know, you're always going to be like up and down, you know. So in the long run, acknowledging the emotions is the way forward, right? So that's the video. I hope it was a useful video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for me if you feel like doing that. I appreciate it very much. And as always, I wish you many, many blessings, love and light. Take care.